Have you ever had one of those days where you feel like you're just going through the motions? Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. Well, that was pretty much John's life. He was a farmer, living a simple, quiet life in a small, landlocked town, miles and miles away from any large body of water. His days were predictable, filled with the familiar sounds of chickens clucking and the scent of freshly tilled earth. But one ordinary Tuesday, something happened that would turn his predictable world completely upside down. It all started with a storm, a real monster of a storm that shook the old farmhouse to its foundations. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, and rain lashed against the windows. When dawn finally broke, the world was washed clean. But something was different. As John stepped outside to check on his fields, he noticed something massive and completely out of place, sticking out of the mud in his cornfield. It was huge, dark, and curved. His first thought, maybe a piece of a silo had blown over. But as he got closer, his heart started to pound in his chest. This was no silo. It was the curved bow of a ship, a massive, ancient-looking wooden ship right in the middle of his landlocked farm. How on earth did a ship get here? His town was hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean. It just didn't make any sense. He walked around it, his boots sinking into the soft mud. The vessel was colossal, far bigger than any fishing boat he'd ever seen in pictures. It was made of a dark, unfamiliar wood, covered in strange carvings that seemed to swirl and dance in the morning light. It looked ancient, like it had sailed out of a history book and gotten lost. John reached out and touched the weathered hull. It felt solid, real. This wasn't a dream. A ghost ship had somehow appeared in his cornfield. Word travels fast in a small town. Before John had even finished his morning coffee, his neighbor, Old Man Fitzwilliam, was leaning over the fence, his eyes wide as saucers. Soon the whole town was buzzing. People started showing up, cars lining the dirt road leading to his farm. They came with cameras, with questions, with theories. Was it a prank? A movie set? Some even whispered that it was a sign, a miracle. John, a man who cherished his peace and quiet, was suddenly the center of a town-wide mystery. He just wanted to understand what was happening. He decided he had to get inside. Finding an entrance wasn't easy. The ship was half buried in the earth, and there were no visible doors or hatches on the exposed side. After hours of searching, he found a small, rotted-out section of the hull near the stern. With a bit of effort, he managed to pry the boards apart, creating a hole just big enough to squeeze through. Taking a deep breath and grabbing a flashlight, he slipped into the darkness. The air inside was thick and musty, smelling of old wood, salt water, and something else. Something strangely sweet, like dried flowers. His flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a scene that made him gasp. The inside was even more bewildering than the outside. It wasn't a cargo hold filled with crates or an empty deck. It looked lived in, but not by sailors. The main chamber was like a vast, arboreal wonderland. Strange, glowing plants snaked their way up the walls, casting an ethereal, soft blue light. In the center of the room, a massive tree grew, its branches reaching up towards the deck, its leaves shimmering with a light of their own. It was like he had stepped not just into a ship, but into an entirely different world. A floating forest, a secret garden sailing through the earth. What was this place? As his eyes adjusted, he started noticing the details. Tiny, intricate wooden structures were nestled among the branches of the central tree, like miniature houses in a fairy village. Delicate rope bridges connected different levels. He saw small, abandoned tools, woven baskets, and tiny cups carved from nuts. It was clear that this ship had been home to someone or something, but they were long gone. A deep sense of wonder and a touch of sadness washed over him. He was standing in the middle of a lost civilization, a beautiful, forgotten world encased in a wooden shell. He ventured deeper, his flashlight beam dancing across walls covered in more of those strange, swirling carvings he'd seen on the outside. They weren't just decoration. They seemed to tell a story. He saw images of star charts unlike any he knew, depictions of the strange plants growing around him, and figures of people, or beings, with long, elegant limbs and kind faces, tending to the giant tree. It was a pictorial history, a silent narrative of a journey. These people, whoever they were, weren't just sailors. They were gardeners, astronomers, artists, and their ship wasn't meant for water. The star charts made him think, was it possible this ship sailed between the stars? That's when he found the journal. It was tucked away in a small carved-out nook in the trunk of the central tree, bound in a soft leather-like material. He opened it carefully. The pages were filled with elegant, flowing script he couldn't read, but it was filled with drawings. Beautiful, detailed sketches of the ship, the tree, the stars, and the beings who lived here. One drawing in particular caught his eye. It showed the ship not on water, but flying through a sea of stars, propelled by a light that seemed to emanate from the great tree itself. The tree wasn't just a plant, it was the engine, the heart of the ship. John spent what felt like hours in that ship, piecing together the silent story left behind. These beings, these star gardeners, had traveled through the cosmos in their living vessel. But something had gone wrong. The final pages of the journal showed frantic drawings, a crack appearing in the tree's trunk, the ship spiraling downwards, a crash landing. They had crashed here on Earth centuries, maybe millennia ago. The storm hadn't brought the ship. It had simply washed away the Earth that had hidden it for so long. The beings were gone, but their incredible vessel, their legacy, remained. Returning to the outside world felt like waking from a vivid dream. The crowd had grown, and now there were reporters and even a few serious-looking people in suits. They all wanted to know what he'd found. But how could he explain a flying tree ship and a lost race of star gardeners? They would think he was crazy. He looked back at the ship, this impossible, beautiful thing that had landed in his life. It was more than just a discovery. It felt like a responsibility. He knew he couldn't let it be taken apart, studied, and put in a museum. It was a living thing, a tomb, a memorial. He had to protect it. And that's what he did. John, the quiet farmer, found his voice. He stood before the crowd and told them not the whole truth, but a version of it. He spoke of its age, its beauty, and the feeling of reverence he felt inside. He argued that it was a world treasure that needed to be preserved right where it was. To his surprise, the townspeople agreed. They had seen it too, felt its magic. They formed a human chain around the ship, protecting it from the outside world. The story of the farmer and his field ship became a legend. John's ordinary life was over. He was no longer just a farmer. He was the keeper of a starship, the guardian of a secret garden, a man whose world had become infinitely larger, all thanks to a storm and the extraordinary discovery it uncovered. What an incredible story, right? It just goes to show you, you never know what secrets might be hiding just beneath the surface of your own backyard. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing tales. See you next time.